I want everyone to please welcome Mr. Daniel Cowen from 3Doodler.
I was left to my own devices.
Okay.
Many days.
So, Daniel, let me get this straight. You're from England, right?
I am,
Where in
yes.
England are you from?
From London.
Okay, but you had a 16-hour flight here from where?
From Hong Kong.
Okay, so
which is where I now live.
Okay, now why do you live in Hong Kong?
So partly out of preference, we love living there as
Yeah.
a team. Like everyone enjoys it, but also we're an hour and a half from our factory. We can
Okay.
prototype within a week. We can run across the border, get things made up, and it just means we're that much more efficient.
Okay, so now I heard something about the startup community in Hong Kong. Is there a difference between the English startup community and the one in Hong Kong?
I think they're overlapping a lot now. Like
Okay.
the overlap's kind of getting increasingly broader, and there are new kind of startup spaces, co-working spaces, and there's a lot happening.
Okay, so you wouldn't say there's a huge contrast anymore? between
Not a
Hong Kong
massive
and
contrast.
Okay, okay. So we're gonna let you get to it.
Okay.
So have fun, good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Daniel Cowen.
I've only got 18 minutes now. Okay, right. Good, we're up on the screen. So I'm going to go through the background of 3Doodler, and the first thing I want to say is that I normally get asked about how we crowdfunded, how our Kickstarter went. But today we're going to shift the focus to what happened after Kickstarter, and how this amazing e-commerce platform and now this new phenomenon of crowdfunding helped us build a real business that is now also going to bricks and mortar. So today I'm going to go through the background of 3Doodler, some of our key milestones to date. I'm going to talk a little bit about crowdfunding and what it represented for us and how it's a real paradigm shift in getting a company and a product started. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we built our company in terms of operations, a little bit about the community we're building, and then a tiny bit of crystal ball gazing into the future. So for those of you that don't know, the 3Doodler is the world's first 3D printing pen. It's a pen that literally lets you draw objects in plastic immediately. It puts the power of a 3D printer in your hand. And some of you will recognize that image on the top corner, which was from our Kickstarter video. The video opens and Max is drawing a square, and everyone's like, oh, did that really just happen? And the product you see there is what we now have 6 months after that Kickstarter, which is the product that we're now shipping all over the world. I'm going to show you a quick video, which gives you an idea of exactly how it's used. So ignore the history of the pen. And all the items you're about to see were made with the pen as well. So really the possibilities are limitless. If you can imagine it, you can 3Doodle it. For some people it takes more patience than others, but you can get there. This product was eventually, after our Kickstarter, voted one of the top 25 inventions of the year by Time magazine. And what it represents for us is the intersection of art and tech and creativity and tech. And that, in some senses, is what's so interesting. You know, it's part 3D printer, it's part crowdfund, it's part e-commerce, and it's part tech. And we seem to have had this perfect storm, this kind of Venn diagram of overlapping circles that's resulted in us getting a lot of coverage and a lot of hype. And people are using it in amazing ways. As I'll show you in a minute, we've now sold over 120,000 pens just in the space of a year. And people are using it to make phenomenal things that we never pictured, like this dress. So this was made by 2 design students in Hong Kong. Very intricate, took them a couple of weeks. We're seeing it used more and more in the field of education to teach science, STEM, math, technology, and of course art. So how did it come about? Like all great inventions, the 3Doodler started with a mistake. Pete Dilworth and Max Bogue, my co-founders, were running a prototyping company, coming up with toy concepts. And they were using their 3D printer to produce a prototype for a new toy when it missed a gap in the print. So for anyone here who knows about 3D printing, you normally have to start the print again, rework the CAD model, make sure there's some support structure in place. But Pete was like, hold on, why don't I just rip the printer apart, take the extruder head, and fill in the gap? And that was the first 3Doodler. And what you see there on the right is what we call a teacup. It was their UPS 3D printer ripped apart with a 3D printed handle. And they would sit there and blow on the plastic as it came out to get it to harden. It worked horribly, but it worked. So from there, we decided, to kickstart the project. It wasn't quite that simple. We thought about whether we should sell it, whether we should license it, but there was something about this item, something so unique and revolutionary about it. We wanted to grow it and build it ourselves. Where were we going to get the money from? None of us were experienced entrepreneurs. None of us had great connections to the Valley. And there was this platform that we'd brought stuff on called Kickstarter, where you could put your dream and your hope, and people would get behind it. So after about 3.5 months of meticulous planning, watching a bunch of failed projects and successful projects, we put our project up there. And within about the space of a day, we raised $500,000. The next day, another $500,000. The day after that, another $500,000. And then we very intentionally slowed things down. We started to push the delivery dates out so that we wouldn't be overreaching and be unable to fulfill for our customers. I think that's a very important lesson just generally. When you launch a project like this, stay within what you know you can fulfill and achieve. Because when you're late or when things go wrong, you'll never hear the end of it. But if you can deliver to your customers on time, they'll be phenomenally happy and satisfied. So we came out of our Kickstarter with $2.34 million sitting in an Amazon account that we then transferred to our bank account, and 25,000 people who had brought or pre-purchased 3Doodlers. That is an amazing community to start with. And that is one of the things that's so unique about crowdfunding. You don't just get money, you get this kind of cohort of fans and backers who will do almost anything for you to help you get the product out there, to advise you on it, to give you feedback. What I've put up here is just a little timeline of how product development takes place. And the other thing I want to point out is, like, you don't just throw a Kickstarter up there and like hidden hope, and if you're lucky it will take off and raise you $1 million. There was a lot of planning that went into 3Doodler. So I mean, we launched in February 2013, but there was life before that date and life after that date. And as you can see here, there's approximately 9 months before February 2013 where we were doing product development, R&D, making prototypes, planning our Kickstarter, and getting as far as we could within our means and our financial resources to launch that campaign, knowing approximately what the cost of building a 3Doodler would be. We didn't know what the cost of building 25,000 3Doodlers would be, because we hadn't expected the response to be quite that phenomenal. But that's what happens afterwards. And just so you guys have some idea, it's not, I think from the position of a backer, they go onto Kickstarter, they back a project, and then they wait a few months, and the product's normally a bit late. They call up and complain. A couple months later, it gets delivered, and everyone's happy. But there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes while that's going on. And I put some of the stages up here, including redesigning the product for manufacturing. Creating a handmade prototype is one thing, but taking it to mass production and producing tens of thousands at a time requires a very different design thinking. So we had to go through that. We had to recost everything. We had to source our parts, get them custom made, make sure that we could find suppliers who could supply tens and now hundreds of thousands of components. And then eventually, you ramp up into full production and get the product out there. We ended up shipping on time by about a day. I still keep a memento on my keyring here. It's a ferrite magnet. On the last day of September, which was the month we had to ship in, we realized that there was some testing that we just fell short of. So we had to install magnets on every single power pack of the first 500 units that were going out. So my team ran up to northern Hong Kong, and we sat there in the production facility, literally putting magnets on the power adapters so that these would ship and be in compliant with all the regulations. We're past that now, which is good. Since then, a lot has been happening with our company. So we spent September to February of this year shipping to our Kickstarter backers. We finished shipping to our last backer a couple of weeks ahead of schedule. And then we started rolling out to retail. And this, again, is where it gets really interesting, because we're effectively an e-commerce company. We started as an e-commerce company, and we got launched into old school bricks and mortar traditional retail because of the recognition that we got online. So as you can see up here, I've got a list of some of our retailers that we now work with, including some Scandinavian ones like Claes Olsen and Cool Stuff. We were in the MoMA design store in New York. And to get to the end of that slide pretty quickly, we've now shipped 120,000 pens. That's 120,000 people out there who in a year have received our product and are making amazing things with it. We now ship to over 80 countries through one of our e-commerce partners, who we work very closely with, but outsource, as I'll get into in a minute, a lot of our capabilities to. And we have distribution and retailers working with us in 40 countries. And as you can see on the right, we are, if you categorize us as a 3D printer, the world's highest selling 3D printing device. 120,000 in a year, compared to last year in 3D printing, which saw approximately 41,000 printers, and this year maybe 75,000. So in a year, we've almost capped what 3D printers have done as a whole market in 2 years. How does that happen? So there are two assumptions that people often make when they're dealing with startups that grow rapidly and are successful. And I've put them up here. And the first one is that you must have a lot of funding, and it probably came from a VC. And the second is that you've got a huge team, and there's no way you could have done this without having a very, very big team that's growing fast. We buck those assumptions and we buck those trends. And again, a lot of that is rooted in the way we began and how we crowdfunded and how we started online. So to deal with the first assumption, we do not have a lot of VC money. Our VC funding is $0. Our debt financing is $0. Our crowdfunding was 2.34, but we were profitable in year one because we really planned out what we were going to be doing and made sure that that Kickstarter worked for us to give us working capital moving forward. And this brings me into probably the most academic part of this talk, which is really what crowdfunding is doing to the power play in e-commerce and the VC and funding world. And the writing's really small here, so I can barely read it, but I've put the crowdfunding as a new form of e-commerce that has completely changed the way companies and products are built and funded. It's absolutely true. And the reason why is because you get proof of concept off the bat. And that's my first point up there. When you put your project on Kickstarter, and if you plan it well, you will get a taste of what the public think of it. And that's something that you would normally only get after being funded, going into production, and getting to retail. So you've just leapfrogged over 2 years of pain and agony that most companies and most products have to go through, which is the second point on there. It also means that you can focus straight out of the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding campaign on building your product and building your company. You're not focusing on raising funding. You're not focusing on convincing someone that you have a business model that works. And you're also not focusing on managing new directors or new investors who have all kinds of demands on you. It also means that if we do ever go for VC, it won't have been for that seed capital. It'll be 2-3 years in when we're looking for money to expand much more rapidly. It's a later stage consideration for us now. And I think what crowdfunding has done is made VC or external funding a later stage consideration for a lot of companies. And the final point I've got up there is that it gives you a better negotiating position with retailers, with investors, with everyone. By the time you get to retail, you've got that proof of concept. You've got people, regular Joe Blogs, public, who've gone and brought your product and actually given you their money on blind faith. And then when you go to investors, you've got a company that's generating cash. That makes banks and VCs a lot easier to talk to. So I mean, that for me is the most revolutionary thing about crowdfunding and how it ties into e-commerce and how it's disrupting the whole ecosystem. Now, having a huge team, again, we don't. We've built this company very leanly, partly because we didn't have swathes of money from VCs. And we wanted to make sure that Kickstarter money went as far as it could. So we do not have 20, 30, 40, 50 people. We have 8 full-time, 5 part-time, a couple of very key outsourcing partners who help us with very capital and labor-intensive jobs like customer service, logistics, freight forwarding. And what I've done, and this is different for every company, is built 2 buckets. And these 2 buckets represent things that we focused on and not focused on. Like I said, this will be different for every company. I broke it up into core competencies and desirable competencies, and non-core and non-desirable. And what I've got in the core are the things you would expect from a company like us if you look at our personnel makeup. I've got product development, engineering, R&D, and owning our intellectual property. That is something that is incredibly important to us. It's where we began, and it's what we're good at. I've got design, brand, community, web building, and of course, certain aspects of customer service, which I'll get onto in a minute. Because that's us, we're public facing. We've always been consumer facing. And I think as we grow and as there are eventually competitors on the market, it's going to be that community that we build and that brand and that recognition and that design strength that we have that keeps us ahead. Sales and marketing, and also finance, I count as core competencies. Sales, again, is nuanced. So I'm going to touch on sales and customer service in a minute again. And then we handle all our sourcing, supplier relationships and logistics to some extent ourselves as well. Where we do outsource, we maintain operational oversight. Again, I'll touch on that in a second. So let me very briefly run through non-core. We've tried to avoid taking on areas of the business that would be very labor intensive or very capital intensive, because we didn't have the kind of capital that we needed out the gate to build a huge logistics setup of our own or build a huge customer service team of our own. We've also outsource some of our sales, if you can view it that way, to distributors in key markets. And this is an interesting one. I think when you're reading sales, and if you read books like The 5-Hour Workweek for whatever it's worth, the thing you learn is that you can't spread yourself too thin. You've got to take on customers that you can handle and that are big enough volume. And where there are markets or customers that you can't handle or can't understand, that's where great partners come in. So rather than building a massive sales force, we've taken the approach of identifying key customers that we want to serve directly, who we want to have pivotal relationships with. And then we've gone country by country and sector by sector and really spent a lot of time rigorously assessing distributors who can help us handle the Middle Eastern market, the European market, or aspects of it, and even this market. And we get a lot of pushback sometimes from people we're assessing because we ask a lot of questions. But what we've been doing is systematically building up an understanding of what we're looking for in a partner. So things that matter to us in the core are things that we transpose onto them. So brand and customer service and the ability to provide maintenance and repairs. Those are like linchpins of what we look for in a distribution partner. So even though we're outsourcing, we make sure those remain in place. The overall theme is that we try not to spend too much time managing, and we're trying to make sure that we're executing the whole time. We're in a fast-moving space. There's a lot we want to do with this company and this product, and we don't want to get bogged down by that. So another great example is customer service. To have a full international 24-hour customer service system takes tens of people. So what we do is we use our e-commerce partner, our back-end partner's customer service team. It's a scalable solution. We don't own or pay for those staff per se. And what it means we can do is we can set the theme, we can set the content and the questions, and we can manage them and have oversight over what they're saying and doing. But we're not burdened with the cost of that or the managerial time expense of that. And then when things need to be escalated, they come up to us. So it's nuanced. And that's why there's items that are in both the core and the non-core, and the desirable and the non-desirable. We've just tried to build this smartly. And I think as time goes on, it will change. Like I said, for every company it's different, and then every year it will be different. And for us, one of the big challenges moving forward is life after we've built our retail channels. Like, I hope and I believe that this product will be a perennial, and it will keep going. And we're doing everything we can in terms of product releases and accessories and building an ecosystem to ensure that. But if retail catches the flu, there are still millions of people out there who've never heard of the 3Doodler or never picked it up. How do we reach them? We reach them through e-commerce, and we reach them online. So for us, battle plan for 2014 was don't make mistakes, build good retail channels, make sure we're doing e-commerce properly. Battle plan for next year is exploit those retail channels. Really get out there and make sure that we're pushing our product and our knowledge into that market, but make sure we're prepared and future-proofed for 2016 and 2017. Finally, I've got 2 minutes left on the clock. We're trying to build an ecosystem. And this was something I touched on earlier. We're trying to build a creative community that inspires one another. And we don't have a mission statement yet. I think we're a bit too young to have that. I think we want to see what form this company takes. But it would be fair to say one of our missions is to equip our community with the tools and the materials so they can create things that inspire themselves, inspire one another. Because that is the best advocacy you can get. You as companies, you don't want just customers. You want fans and you want advocates who go out and spread the word about your product and what can be done with it. So these are some of the questions we ask ourselves. How do you get people to create? How do you get people to then share what they create? How do you make other people see it? It's not enough that it's just out there. How do you build a sense of community longer term among that group? And how do you then support and foster that community? And we're busy planning a lot of this right now, and I'll show you 2 initiatives we're working on at the moment. But there's a lot happening behind closed doors with the aim of moving the paradigm of not so much online advertising, but our online focus to how we can make that community work with and for us to grow the brand. So 2 things we're just doing, which I want to share with you, is making inspiration accessible. So if you go to our community website, the3doodler.com/create, you'll now see hundreds of projects. Some of the masks up there are recent ones that we did for Halloween. We run contests on Facebook. We call them Doodle-Off to see who can produce the best iPhone case one week, or this week the best chess set using the 3Doodler pen, and then the community votes on them. And what we're trying to do is just try different ideas, see what really gels with people. The Doodle-Off began in our office with us challenging each other, and we thought, hey, let's put it online. And these stencils are online as well, and we're getting people to contribute and create, and we're going to be moving more and more towards mobile to help people share what they're creating more quickly. And then almost finally, providing the right tools and materials. So we now have over 50 plastic colors, because we know people want variety. we are developing tools and accessories that can help people doodle and create more easily. So the doodle stand, which you can hold your pen in, and that actually means you can move the doodle stand along the table if you don't want to be pressing the buttons too firmly. Different nozzles, a foot pedal, harking back to the days of sewing machines. So looking towards the future, this product has phenomenal potential. Like I genuinely believe it when I say to people, in 10 years' time, you'll see this in every classroom in most developed countries in the world, and hopefully non-developed ones as well. It's being used by architects and engineers, designers, hobbyists, teachers for the blind to build tactile learning aids on the spot, animators, home decorators, corporate gifting. It happens. And it's going really well. And one of the conundrums we have is, where do we focus our attention? With so many markets, it's easier sometimes to market into a niche. But we have our eyes on a couple of key sectors, like the hobby and the creative market, and of course the education market. And over the next few years, you'll see our offering diversify, and you'll see this product going from strength to strength as people just continue to create amazing things.
Thank you.
Karsten, we have time for one question on Twitter.
One question.
What is it?
Okay,
choose the best one.
I have to choose the best one.
No offense to the rest of you.
That's a resounding yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. One of the questions is, how do you make use of the crowd and fans, as now that you've passed the startup phase? You've mentioned it a little bit, but how do you really plan to reach out in the long run?
Communication is so important. I can't underestimate, when we were running the Kickstarter, giving them frequent updates was important. And then towards the end of the Kickstarter, if you go and look at our updates, we then tried to move them across to our social channels very meticulously. We let them know that would be where we were communicating from. So until the Kickstarter ended, there was this little ecosystem, which was our project. And then we tried to push it out there into the world. And now what we're trying to do is build both an offline and an online community. So we're trying to identify people who are using the pen in exciting ways and make them ambassadors and make them the creators that people can see. And then we're trying to take those people in the real world offline and work out what kind of events they can be working or helping us with, whether it's a doodle and wine in their local town or whether it's the Dumbo Art Fair in New York, and see how we can galvanize them and get the word out that way. So there's a lot happening. I mean, I sometimes call it an army of 3Doodlers, and that in a sense is what we're trying to build, because when they get out there and they use the pen, they do amazing things with it.
Thank you, Daniel. So if anybody wants to get their hands on a 3Doodler, you can get it on their website, the3doodler.com, or you can get it at coolstuff.com. And if you're a lucky winner for the award dinner tonight, you will actually win a 3Doodler.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Great.